Hi, my name is Blair Cade. They never really said my name, not at weddings, not in press releases, not even at my own fundraiser. I was always just the younger one, her sister, his wife. But when my sister slapped me in a hallway full of people and my billionaire husband shouted, "If you touch her again, I'll bury you," suddenly, everyone remembered who I was. Still, that moment wasn't the beginning. What if I told you my sister stole my scholarship, erased my work, and blamed me for a crime I didn't commit, and my own mother helped her? Would you believe me? Or would you believe the sister with the perfect smile, the viral podcast, and the story that made me look like the villain? Because that's the part no one talks about. How easy it is to erase a woman when her own family helps bury the truth. Want to know what finally made me fight back? It was supposed to be my day, my wedding, my name on the invitations, my vows, my hand in his. Yet as I stood under the soft string lights and white linen drapes of the Charleston Garden venue, what echoed most in my memory wasn't laughter or music. It was the quiet. The kind of quiet that stings because it isn't the absence of noise, but the absence of acknowledgement. They called me her, or worse, the younger one. That's all I heard from my own family as they mingled with Dorian's side, drinks in hand, praise on their tongues, but none for me. Isolde's sister looks nice. She really landed well, huh? No one said my name. Not once. Not even when the cake was cut. I was the bride, but somehow, I still wasn't the center of anything. My mom clinked her glass during the reception and stood with the grace of a Southern belle, full of charm and glossed over history. She smiled at Dorian, called him our family's lucky charm. She thanked the guests for coming to celebrate this new chapter for the Keats family. When it was time to mention me, she hesitated, blinked twice, and said, "And of course, our little girl, the bride." Just that. The bride. Not Blair. Not once. I stood there in my white dress, clutching the lace-wrapped bouquet tighter than I should have. That small pause when she forgot my name? It wasn't new. It wasn't even surprising. It was just expected. And maybe that's what hurt the most. I remember the school pickups. Isolde would come out first, hair perfectly braided, ribbons tied just right. I'd be behind her, scuffed shoes, peanut butter stain on my shirt. Mom would wave from the car and yell, "Isolde, grab your sister. Blay, come on, girls." Every time. She always caught herself, but not before the damage was done. It was like I had to write her name just to be seen. When I turned 12, I tried spelling my name with an E at the end, Blair. I thought maybe it'd look prettier, stand out more. I even signed a birthday card that way. My mom looked at it and chuckled. "You trying to be fancy now, sugar?" She didn't say it mean, but she didn't ask why either. Years passed like that, me trailing behind someone else's shine. But when I turned 17, I had one win, a big one. I'd worked my tail off for a full-ride journalism scholarship, interviews, essays, part-time jobs on top of school. I remember the moment I opened the letter. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands trembling, reading it 3 times before I let myself believe it. Isolde was home from college for the weekend. She looked at the letter and said, "Oh, that's nice." Later that night, Mom came into my room. "Sweetheart," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed like she always did when she wanted something softened. "Your sister's struggling. Her internship didn't pan out, and she's been thinking about transferring programs. She's been so stressed, you know. What if we let her apply under your name, just this once? She won't actually use it, of course, but it might help open a door." I stared at her. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. "We'll fix it later," she added. "You're smart. You'll have more chances." And just like that, the scholarship was gone. The university called weeks later, confused about the enrollment switch. I didn't even answer. I just hung up the phone and walked outside, barefoot, into the backyard until the grass felt cold beneath me. I folded the letter into a drawer and never opened it again. Isolde flew to Europe that fall. New program, new city, my dreams, packed into her suitcase. I didn't talk about it, not to my dad, he was already gone by then, not to Dorian, we hadn't met yet. I just swallowed it, like I had swallowed every misstep that wasn't mine. And now, here I was, nearly 2 decades later, sitting at my desk the night before a charity gala that bore my husband's name. Keats Foundation Annual Benefit. I'd helped plan every inch of it, booked vendors, reviewed grant proposals, wrote speeches, but when I searched the press releases, the articles, the digital flyers, all I saw was hosted by Dorian Keats and family. And in the photos, me, cropped, me, unnamed, me, again. I typed my own name into the search bar. Blair Cade. Nothing. Then I tried Isolde Cade. Pages, old interviews, op-eds she didn't write, PR awards she didn't earn. Somehow, even in my life, she remained the headline. My chest tightened. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just the price of being quiet too long. I opened my email, wrote a message to my mother. Subject line, why is it always her name? I typed 3 lines, deleted 2, wrote them again. My finger hovered over send like it weighed 50 pounds, but I didn't click it. Instead, I saved it to drafts, stood up from my desk, and grabbed my robe. The house was still. Dorian was out of town, New York for a board meeting. I was alone. As usual, I had silence for company. Then came the knock. 3 taps. Light, familiar. I knew that rhythm. From the other side of the door, her voice floated through like it always did, too sweet to be sincere. Blair, you coming? Everyone's waiting for me. I didn't answer Isolde right away. I stood at the edge of my hallway, wrapped in my robe, staring at the door like it might do the talking for me. Her voice had already seeped into the floorboards, that syrupy tone she always used when there were eyes on her and ears nearby. Everyone's waiting for me. Not us, not we, just her. I took a deep breath, pulled on a sweater over my dress, and slipped into my heels. The gala wasn't about me anyway. It never had been. I was there to be presentable, agreeable, forgettable. Background to Dorian's foreground. Downstairs, the car waited. The driver opened the door without a word. I slid in next to Dorian, who looked up from his phone just long enough to smile and squeeze my hand. You look great, he said. I smiled back. Thanks. But inside, my nerves rattled like loose change in a dryer. When we arrived, the flash of cameras started before I even stepped out. I followed Dorian's lead, stepping carefully onto the red carpet rolled across the hotel's courtyard. Photographers called his name. Nobody called mine. One reporter leaned into a colleague and said, Is that Isolde's sister? And they both chuckled like that alone was newsworthy. The room inside glowed. Chandeliers, string lights, too many mirrors. Everything about it screamed opulence and order. I clutched my clutch tighter and stayed close to Dorian's side as we made the rounds. The head of the hospital board shook his hand. A state senator nodded with that practiced half-smile. I offered polite hellos and mostly received nods in return. At some point, I heard one woman whisper, Is she his assistant, or? Before her voice trailed off, I didn't bother correcting her. And then, as if summoned by discomfort, Isolde appeared. She wore crimson, not red, crimson. The kind of red that says, Yes, everyone is looking at me, as they should. Her lipstick matched, her nails too. She gave Dorian a dramatic air kiss on the cheek, then turned to me. Blair, she said with a sugary breath, you finally wore color. I'm so proud. It was a soft jab, nothing direct, but I caught the sarcasm tucked inside her smile. I opened my mouth, thought better of it, and closed it again. The rest of the night passed in fragments, speeches, applause, champagne, more photos. I stood in group shots where I was angled just behind Isolde, like a prop or shadow. When Dorian went to speak with donors, I wandered toward the dessert table, needing a minute of normalcy. That's when someone tapped me on the shoulder. Blair, said a young staffer, they're about to show the tribute video. You're gonna love it. I nodded, unsure what he meant. I hadn't approved any video. The lights dimmed. A screen dropped from the ceiling. Music swelled, something triumphant and orchestral. The montage began. Photos of the foundation's history, shots of Dorian at events, smiling children, rebuilt clinics. Then came a series of interviews. And then, my wedding. My face appeared, laughing mid-sentence, clearly cropped from our wedding footage. Over it played a voice, my sister's, from her speech that night. My little sister always had good timing. She never had the brains, but she knew how to pick a husband. Laughter echoed from the audience. The line wasn't edited. It wasn't removed. It was spotlighted. I froze. My cheeks burned as I turned toward the screen. The rest of the video faded to static in my brain. I couldn't hear the applause that followed. I barely noticed Dorian return to my side until he whispered, "What the hell was that?" I couldn't answer. I just smiled because a camera had found us again. Later that night, in the car ride home, I scrolled my phone. A clip of Isolde's speech, that exact quote, was already trending. A TikTok edit, Instagram reels, hashtags, hashtag gold digger, sister had brains optional, hashtag wife material, and my personal favorite, when you marry up and your sister brings you down. Dorian saw it too. He cursed under his breath, tossed his phone aside, and looked at me. "Do you want me to say something?" I shook my head. "No, it'll just make it worse." He paused, then said softly, "It's already bad." I didn't argue. That night, I curled up on our living room couch, wrapped in a throw blanket, holding my phone like a hot coal. I scrolled until my eyes burned. I saw my own face, frozen in awkward laughter, caught mid-sentence, turned into a joke for strangers. I read thousands of comments, some mocking, some defending, most indifferent. Dorian kissed my forehead, but even that felt like pity. He tried to distract me with dinner. I picked at it, said I was tired. He gave me space. Alone again, I opened an old box from my bedroom closet. Inside were journals, years' worth. I flipped through pages, looking for something. A reminder of who I used to be before all this. Before my life became performance, and my name became a punchline. What I found was half-ripped pages, stories I never finished, ideas I buried under obligations. I used to write like I mattered, like my words could cut through noise. Now I barely recognize the woman who'd written those pages. I don't know what I was looking for. Validation? Comfort? Permission to fall apart? But I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was past crying. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message in the family group chat, one that was, without a doubt, never meant for me. It was from Mom. "Let her be angry. You're the one with a future." Sent to Isolde. Not me, but it went to all of us. No one deleted it. No one followed up. Not even a "sorry, wrong chat." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I left the group, quietly. No parting words. Just gone. That afternoon, I lay on my side in bed, sunlight streaking through the blinds, thinking about how strange it was to feel hollow and heavy at the same time. They didn't get to define me anymore. I whispered it to myself like a vow. Then I reached under my bed, pulled out my laptop, and opened a folder I'd been adding to slowly over the years. It was called Receipts. My fingers hovered over the screen like they weren't mine. The glow of my laptop cast a cold light across my thighs, and my breath felt still, suspended. I had opened that folder dozens of times over the years, always adding to it, screenshots, forwarded emails, statements, things no one thought I noticed. But I never watched anything in it. Not really. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. I told myself I just needed to remember, to make sure I wasn't imagining what had been done to me. I needed evidence that what I felt wasn't just bitterness or overreaction. The file names were clinical, coded. I scrolled past blurry phone captures and PDFs until one caught my eye. Playroom 2002.movie. I blinked. That name meant nothing, at first. Then I remembered. I was 9. Isolde would have been 11. Back then, Mom had a thing for labeling everything by date and location. We had one of those clunky old cameras she propped up during holidays or tantrums, depending on the occasion. I clicked the file. The screen crackled for a moment before stabilizing. It was grainy, pixelated like time had sandpapered the edges. There I was, smaller, rounder, sitting cross-legged in the playroom surrounded by blocks and plastic teacups. My hair was in two uneven pigtails, and I was talking softly to myself, arranging the cups. Then Isolde entered the frame. She didn't say a word. She marched in like she owned the space, because she did. She looked straight into the camera, then turned toward me. I smiled up at her, said something. I couldn't hear it clearly, but it looked like, "Wanna play?" She didn't answer. She walked behind me, paused, then shoved me, hard. I stumbled forward, my little arms catching myself against the carpet, and the cups clattered. I froze in the video. So did I, watching it. Then came the scream. Not mine. Hers. "Mom! Blair pushed me!" The camera tilted, then footsteps. Adult. Fast. The door opened, and there was Mom, eyes wide. "Blair!" she barked. "Why do you always have to ruin things?" I turned, teary-eyed, on screen. I tried to explain, but Mom was already holding Isolde, rubbing her back like she was the one bleeding. The footage ended there. No fade out, just static. I didn't move. It felt like watching someone else's childhood. Some other little girl, blamed and scolded for something she didn't do, again. But I remembered that day. I remembered thinking I had done something wrong, that somehow I'd caused the whole thing, that I was clumsy, messy, disruptive. It wasn't until now that I saw the full picture. I'd apologized that day. I'd cried myself to sleep feeling guilty, and Isolde got ice cream. I got silence. The worst part? I believed her. For years, I let that moment tell me who I was. I slammed the laptop shut, not out of rage, but disbelief. I stood slowly, legs stiff, and walked to the bathroom down the hall. I turned the cold water on and splashed it onto my face, letting it drip down my neck. I stared at myself in the mirror. Older now. Harder. But still holding that little girl's voice inside me. "They gaslit a child," I whispered. No one was there to hear it. No one needed to be. It wasn't for them. It was for her, me. I dried my face with a hand towel and walked back into the bedroom. The laptop sat on my duvet like it was daring me to open it again. I did. This time, I didn't hesitate. I found the file again, pressed play, watched it from beginning to end, twice. Then I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Truth. I dragged the video into it. No dramatic music, no plan to share it just yet. I wasn't ready for that, but I needed to have it, needed to see it, because it meant I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't making it up or blowing it out of proportion. I was a little girl who wasn't protected, and now I was a grown woman who finally understood why. My childhood wasn't filled with huge betrayals. It was made of tiny cuts that no one treated. And by the time I noticed I was bleeding, everyone else had already moved on. I lay back on my bed, the screen still glowing next to me, and let my arm drape across my stomach. I wasn't planning anything. I wasn't thinking about exposure or public humiliation, not yet. I just needed to feel it, to hold it in my hands and accept that my version of events was valid. That night, I didn't sleep much, but I didn't cry either. I knew I wouldn't confront Isolde tomorrow, or the next day. I wasn't going to storm her office or post something online for likes. That wasn't me. But something had shifted. There was a new stillness in me, a kind of sharpness behind my eyes that hadn't been there before. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to be palatable or passive. I wasn't trying to soften what I'd seen or justify why they acted the way they did. No, I was done shrinking. I sat up slowly, reached for my journal, and wrote down 3 sentences. They wanted a ghost. I'm about to become the mirror. They're going to see what they made. The screen dimmed to black as I shut the laptop. The glow left behind a faint rectangle on the ceiling, like an afterimage of everything I'd just felt. It was close to midnight, and the house was so still that even the creak of my mattress sounded like it echoed down the hallway. I pulled my legs to my chest and stared at the door. I hadn't locked it, but I hadn't needed to. Dorian was out of town again, and no one else would be knocking tonight. It was just me and the echo of my childhood looping silently in my head. By morning, something in me had settled. Not in a calm way, but like lava cooling just under the surface. I got up early, made coffee, skipped breakfast. There was a fire burning in my gut, but But it wasn't rage, not anymore. It was something sharper. Focused. At around 10 a.m., my phone rang. The screen showed a name I hadn't seen in weeks. Marcy, one of the senior coordinators at the Keats Foundation. I hesitated, then answered. Hi, Marcy. Oh, thank God, she breathed into the receiver. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. What's going on? There's a problem. With the Women's Grant Program, your name is on the paperwork. I frowned. What paperwork? The PR partnership with Bell Communications, the one that launched last week. My heart thudded. I never signed anything. That's what I thought. But they have contracts with your name, your email header, your logo. It's all branded under Blair Keats LLC. I stood up, walked slowly to the kitchen window. Can you send it to me? I already did. And Blair, if this blows up, it's going to look like internal fraud. You need to get ahead of it. I thanked her, hung up, and opened my inbox. There it was, my signature, my email, a digital trail that made me look guilty of something I didn't even know existed. Except I did know. I knew exactly who would do this. Who could? Isolde. The woman who turned my wedding into a punchline, who posted family drama like it was clickbait, who lived on the thrill of public image and private power. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys, slid into my shoes, and left. The drive to Mom's was short. The streets were quiet, and the sunlight reflected off every windshield like little sparks of accusation. Her house looked the same as always. White shutters, over-trimmed hedges, a doormat that read, "Bless this mess," the irony of which made me want to laugh and scream at the same time. I knocked. A moment passed, then the door opened, and there she was. Velma Quayle, my mother, in her pressed house blouse and lipstick at 10 in the morning, like she was always ready for company she never wanted. Well, she said, glancing at the driveway. No Dorian? This is about me, not him. She opened the door wider but didn't move aside. Did you come to talk or accuse? I came for the truth. She stepped back. Inside, the house smelled like lemon polish and a hint of Sunday roast, even though it was Thursday, the kind of artificial hominess that made everything feel staged. She walked into the dining room and gestured toward a chair. Sit. I didn't. Tea? She offered, already reaching for the kettle. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I need to ask you something, and I need you to not deflect. She stiffened slightly but didn't turn around. I don't like that tone. I don't like being impersonated for financial gain. That made her freeze. She turned slowly, placing a teacup on the table. What's this about? There's a PR deal signed under my name. Contracts, branding. Someone forged my identity, Mom, and I know who. Her eyes didn't move. She didn't ask. She just said, Isolde's always been ambitious. Ambitious? I laughed, incredulous. She used me, again. She didn't mean harm. You know how she gets when she's under pressure. I stared at her. That's what you're going with? I asked. She committed fraud. It's family, she said, as if that excused everything. And we protect each other. Stirring all this up, it'll only make it worse. Just let it go. She pushed the teacup toward me. It was the same teacup from when I was 8. When I'd been blamed for breaking a vase I never touched, when I apologized to my sister for a lie she told, when I said sorry just to stop the yelling. And every time, there was a cup of tea waiting, as if that made it okay. I looked down at it. Then I looked up at her. I'm not thirsty anymore. I pushed the cup back gently across the table. Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Silence filled the space between us, thick as fog and heavier than anything else she could have said. I stood. You always take her side, I said quietly, even when you know she's wrong. She's your sister, she replied. And I'm your daughter. I walked to the door, my pulse thudding in my ears. The moment my hand touched the knob, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. One new email. Subject line, you need to see this. The subject line blinked at me again as I stood in my mother's doorway. You need to see this. I didn't open it there. I didn't need the weight of her presence, her floral wallpaper, the lemon-scented gilt, the teacup still untouched on the table, pressing in on me as I read what was surely going to punch the next hole in the boat I was trying to keep afloat. I drove home in silence, Charleston's late-morning humidity beginning to swell against the windshield. On the drive, I kept going over my last words to Mom. Not because I regretted them, but because they'd landed like stone, final, and for once, I didn't rush to smooth it over. Back in my house, I set down my keys, toed off my shoes, and opened my laptop. The email had come from an internal foundation address. No name. Just the video attachment and one line. She submitted this as the final cut. I stared at it, took a breath, clicked play. The footage opened with a bold title, Empower Her, a Keats Foundation story. I recognized the opening shot, B-roll we filmed from a women's wellness clinic I helped launch last fall. I'd personally conducted the interviews, coordinated the outreach, scripted the copy. But within 30 seconds, I knew something was off. My voice had been edited, chopped into fragmented statements that felt hollow, disconnected. Quotes were pulled out of context. Lines meant to be hopeful now felt shallow, even vain. And then came the kicker. Over a slide showcasing the foundation's impact, a sleek caption faded in. Created and developed by Isolde Farron, PR director. My name didn't appear once. I sat back, numb. The music swelled in the background, triumphant and bold. A woman's voice I didn't recognize closed the video with a line I had written. When women tell their stories, they heal more than themselves. Only now, that story no longer belonged to me. It was Friday. The gala was scheduled for Saturday night, and this video, the one I had just seen, was to premiere at the event. I should have been angry, should have thrown something, called someone, screamed. But all I felt was this eerie stillness, the kind that settles in when you've been burned too many times to flinch anymore. That night, I didn't say much at dinner. Dorian noticed. "You want to skip tomorrow?" he asked gently, his fork paused mid-air. "No one would blame you." I shook my head. "I need to be there." He studied me. "Because of them?" "Because of me." Saturday arrived with the kind of humidity that turned everything soft and sticky. I dressed with intention. Clean lines, no ruffles, no soft pastels. A tailored navy jumpsuit, gold cuffs, my hair pulled back, sharp. Unapologetic. Dorian waited downstairs, ready in a charcoal suit. When he saw me, he smiled in a way that said, "You're here for war, not applause." At the gala, everything glittered. The lights, the people, the champagne. It was staged like a coronation. And Isolde, of course, was already gliding between tables like the guest of honor. Reporters flanked her. Staff hovered nearby, hanging onto her fake laugh like it was gospel. Dorian stepped away to greet donors. I waited in the wings, watching the screen being lowered behind the stage. Then, I was called up. I had 20 minutes to present the initiative. 20 minutes to talk about the thing I had poured myself into. I stepped up, greeted the crowd. Tonight, I'm honored to share a project we've built to empower women from the ground up. As I turned to cue the video, I already knew what was coming. But seeing it on that enormous screen, with hundreds of eyes fixed ahead, was something else entirely. The version that played was exactly what I'd seen. My voice distorted, my words hollowed out, and her name front and center. The room didn't erupt, it just shifted. A few whispered, a few leaned toward one another, confused. But most just clapped politely at the end, unaware of what they'd actually seen. I stepped back from the podium, nodded, and walked off stage without a word. Backstage, the air was thicker than it was outside. I stood still while people buzzed around me, lighting techs, staff, a stage manager asking where the next speaker was. Dorian appeared minutes later, his jaw clenched. "Who submitted that?" he asked a junior coordinator. The young man, barely older than 20, fumbled through a tablet, his face pale. "It came from the PR rep, official family contact, Isolde Farron." Of course it did. I didn't bother asking more. I didn't need another confession. I already had my answer. After the speeches ended and the mingling resumed, I found her. She was in the corridor, pressed between two women from a local magazine, telling some story with her hand dramatically fluttering near her throat. When she saw me, she smiled like we were two sisters catching up, not two boxers circling a ring. "Blair," she said brightly, "wasn't that a great turnout?" I stepped closer, low and steady. "You touch my name again, I swear I'll make sure it never appears on another screen." Her smile didn't waver. "Always so dramatic," she said, cocking her head. "I'm done being quiet, Isolde." She blinked once. "So what now? You going to write an op-ed? Whine on social media?" "No," I said. "I'm going to let the truth speak for itself." She laughed, light, condescending. "You always were too sensitive." I turned without responding, walked away down the hallway. And as my heels echoed against the tile, I murmured to myself, soft, certain, final. Next time, I won't warn her. I'll act. The valet line was longer than usual, but I didn't mind. I stood near the back entrance of the hotel, the heavy wooden door propped open by a metal wedge, letting in the night air. It was late enough that the crowd had thinned, the socialites moved on to rooftop drinks or private after-parties. I wasn't interested in either. My heels pinched a little. I shifted my weight, watching the line crawl forward as headlights flickered in and out of the driveway. One by one, people retrieved their luxury vehicles, climbed in with laughter still on their lips, and vanished into the Charleston night. I clutched my wrap around my shoulders, even though it wasn't cold. It felt like armor. I needed something to press against the heat rising up from my chest. Behind me, I heard the sound of heels. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. "Standing here all alone?" came Isolde's voice, soft and laced with that sugar-coated venom she'd perfected. "Would have thought you'd be surrounded by cameras after your big performance." I kept my eyes on the line. She stepped closer. I could feel her presence before I smelled her perfume. Sharp, expensive, suffocating. "You embarrassed me tonight," she hissed, voice low now, venom surfacing. "In front of people who actually matter." My body tensed. I still didn't look at her. Her hand landed on my shoulder, tight, aggressive. I spun to face her, and before I could say a word, she slapped me. It wasn't theatrical. It was fast, brutal. Her palm connected with my cheek and left behind a flash of heat that pulsed beneath my skin. I stumbled a step back, stunned. The valet stand fell quiet. The buzz of idle conversation, the shuffle of car keys, everything stopped. Before I could find words or breath, she grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but enough to let me know she wasn't finished. And that's when Dorian appeared. He moved faster than I'd ever seen him, one hand on her arm, one shielding me. "If you touch her again," he growled, loud enough for the entire valet crew to hear, "I'll bury you." Silence blanketed the space like a dropped curtain. Isolde froze, mouth slightly open. Her eyes darted to the valet stand where two young men stared wide-eyed. Another woman clutched her clutch like it might explain what she'd just witnessed. No one spoke. No one moved. She yanked her arm away and straightened. "You're really going to do this in public?" she snapped at Dorian. "Over her?" Dorian didn't flinch. "This isn't about public or private. This is about you going too far." I stood behind him, my cheek still throbbing, but I didn't cry. I didn't shrink. I stepped beside Dorian and looked her in the eye. "That was your last act," I said, calmly, clearly. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Isolde's face tightened. "You've always been fragile, Blair. I was trying to protect you from looking foolish. Again." "You mean protect me from being seen," I said. "But guess what? You failed." She opened her mouth to respond but shut it again, her eyes scanning the faces around her. Then she turned on her heel and walked off into the dark. No apology, no acknowledgement, just exit stage left. Dorian didn't speak for a while. We waited as our car pulled around. When it arrived, he opened the door for me without a word. I slid in, head buzzing with everything and nothing. The ride home was quiet. Not the kind that suffocates, but the kind that gives space to breathe. He reached over once, squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. That was enough. At home, I didn't head upstairs right away. Instead, I kicked off my shoes, grabbed a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen island. The clock above the stove read 12:14 a.m. Dorian headed to bed. I told him I'd follow soon. Instead, I powered up my laptop, not to scroll, not to distract, to build. I opened a blank document and began outlining everything, every incident, every forged email, every false signature. I linked screenshots, attached timestamps, sorted everything into folders: financial, PR, video, personal. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I was no longer reacting to her chaos. I was preparing. Quietly. Thoroughly. Hours passed. I barely noticed. At 3:47 a.m., I saved the file, backed it up, and closed the laptop. I stared into the dark kitchen for a long moment, still feeling the ghost of her hand against my cheek. But what stayed with me even more than that? The silence after Dorian's words. The room full of strangers who now saw what I'd lived with for years. I stood slowly, turned off the light, and headed upstairs. Sleep didn't come easy, but it came eventually. And in the morning, when I checked my phone, the first headline read, "Sister Smackdown. Keats' family implodes at charity gala." By the time I poured my second cup of coffee, I'd been tagged in over a dozen screenshots, texts, reels, re-edited clips of my face from the gala, all embedded in commentary from people who didn't know me, didn't want to. Sister Smackdown had gone viral. Overnight, I had become a meme again. Only this time, it wasn't a video taken out of context. This was planned, framed, and fully narrated by one voice. Isolde's. I didn't panic. I just opened my inbox and waited for the next move. Hers or mine. It came by noon. The phone call from Etta, my attorney, was calm but clipped. "Come in. Bring everything." By 1 o'clock, I was sitting in her office. Her assistant handed me a bottle of water, then closed the door behind her. Dorian was there too, though he stayed seated in the corner, scrolling silently through news feeds, not interfering. This was my fight. Etta didn't waste time. "We need to go on record," she said, flipping through a stack of printed emails. "This is escalating, fast." She pulled up the latest, a podcast, hosted by two mid-level influencers trying to break into bigger platforms, cheap mics, gossip first tone, but the guest was Isolde. I listened in silence. "My sister's always had this need for attention," she said, her voice syrupy and light. "When we were kids, she once stole money from our mom's purse just to pretend she bought a gift for a teacher. It wasn't even Teacher Appreciation Week. That's how desperate she was." I looked over at Etta. "That never happened." She nodded. "I know. She's lying about things from when we were kids. Things she knows can't be proven either way." "That's the point," Etta said. "She's using the one thing you've never weaponized. Your silence." I clenched my jaw. I hadn't cried in days. Not even after the slap. Not after the video. And I wouldn't now. "She's counting on me to stay quiet." Dorian looked up. "Then don't." The next day, the internet split into factions. Team Isolde, Justice for Blair, #family fraud, #gold digger, Gate. People speculated everything. That I'd married Dorian for money, that I faked the foundation paperwork, that I manipulated him into firing her, that I'd always been jealous of my sister's charisma. I didn't reply to any of it. I spent the day archiving. By evening, I had built a 22-page document linking years of infractions, emails she'd doctored, signatures she'd faked, contracts she'd rerouted. Nothing illegal, not in a slam dunk way, but unethical, repeatedly. And then the blog post dropped. Etta called me before I saw it. She just published a 3,000-word entry titled "The Sister Who Was Never Happy." I opened it, skimmed the title, and scrolled down. It was calculated, polished, designed to look vulnerable. Screenshots, some real, most altered. Emails taken out of context. She painted me as emotionally unstable, manipulative, self-victimizing. The golden child turned toxic, a cautionary tale dressed in cashmere. And the final blow? Velma shared it, right there on Facebook, in between a casserole recipe and a blessed-to-be-grandma post. No caption, Just the link. Not even a defense. Just exposure. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the screen. Then, without a word, I closed the tab. She had just played her final card. Dorian came home around 9. He took one look at me and didn't ask questions, just sat down beside me, his hand resting gently on my thigh. "I'm not going to respond to it," I said. "Good. But I am going to end it." He looked at me fully now. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to release everything. The real version. Not with rage, not with commentary, just facts." "You sure?" I nodded. "She went public. I'm going tactical." I texted Etta. Me. "It's time." Full release. 10 minutes later, she replied with a secured Google Drive link and a draft email to her legal newsletter contacts. The folder was divided by categories: financial misconduct, intellectual property fraud, media manipulation, psychological patterning. Everything had been documented with receipts. I reviewed it twice, word for word, added a preface. "This is not about shame. This is about truth. This is what I've lived, and this is what I will no longer protect." At 11:36 p.m., I scheduled the public release for 9 a.m. sharp. I closed my laptop, stood, and walked to the window. Charleston was quiet. I could hear crickets from the neighbor's yard and the distant hum of someone's porch fan turning slow. Dorian joined me by the window. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said. "But I will be." At 9 a.m., the truth would speak for itself. At 8:59 a.m., I was standing in my kitchen with a slice of dry toast and a mug of lukewarm coffee I'd reheated twice but never actually sipped. The house was quiet. Dorian had left early for meetings, giving me space, though I think he just knew I needed solitude for this part. 1 minute later, the scheduled Google Drive release went live. No fanfare, no warning, no press contact or announcement, just a hyperlink shared with a short caption, "For those who still care about facts," and inside it, years of proof, emails, invoices, audio clips, call transcripts, a video of Isolde whispering to a junior associate, "Don't worry, Blair won't say anything. She never does." Until now. I didn't stay at my computer to watch the clicks climb. I didn't hover on Twitter to track which hashtags were trending. I grabbed my keys, slipped into sneakers, and walked. The streets were still sleepy, the Sunday crowd slow to emerge. I passed joggers, a young mom balancing a toddler on one hip while adjusting a stroller with her free hand, and an old man reading the paper on a bench outside the bakery. The smell of yeast and cinnamon hung in the air like a small mercy. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't check it. I needed to move, not away from something, but toward a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in months. Years, maybe. By the time I circled back to the house, the sun had lifted just high enough to make my porch glisten. I sat on the top step, letting the warmth settle across my shoulders, and finally opened my phone. 17 missed calls. Dozens of messages. From reporters, former classmates, foundation staff, even 2 ex-boyfriends. And at the top, Etta. I called her first. "It's done," she said. "And Blair? It's being picked up by every major outlet." "Did she respond?" I asked. She posted a quote on her Instagram story, something about the price of success being envy. That's it. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Dorian's holding a press conference in an hour," Etta added. "Are you going?" "No, I've done my part." I hung up, walked inside. The toast was still on the counter, untouched. I tossed it in the trash, poured the coffee down the sink, and went upstairs to shower. Half an hour later, I sat on the edge of my bed in a fresh pair of jeans and a sweater, hair damp, skin bare. A different kind of armor, the quiet kind. Then I pulled out the envelope. It was small, sealed, and hand-addressed. Isolde Farron, private. I'd written it the night before, knowing the day would come. Inside was a single flash drive. On it, a voice memo from 4 years ago. A hot mic at a family event, captured by accident. I hadn't even realized it had been saved until I was cleaning old files and stumbled across the file labeled Speech Prep Rehearsal. It wasn't mine. It was her voice, clear and sharp, saying, "Blair, she's nothing. Always was. Just a leech we keep around to look good." Along with the flash drive, I slipped in a note. Handwritten. Simple. "This is the last time I let your voice live in my head." I mailed it that afternoon. No signature, no return address. She would know. Around noon, I sat in the living room and flipped on the TV. Dorian stood behind a podium, suit crisp, jaw tight. "I stand with my wife," he said, without flinching. "Not because she's my partner, but because the evidence speaks for itself. She is not a liability. She is not a whisper in someone else's shadow. She is the reason this foundation still functions." He paused. "This ends now. My wife is not just a survivor, she's a whistleblower. And I am proud of her." I turned it off after that. I didn't need the rest. By late afternoon, the internet had flipped. The hashtag Justice for Blair tag flooded every corner of social media. Influencers who had once reposted Isolde's quotes were now issuing apologies. Brands quietly removed her collaborations. People who had called me a liar were now adding, "I had no idea," in their comments. I received more DMs than I could count. Women who had been sidelined in boardrooms, belittled in family reunions, written out of their own stories. "Thank you for saying it out loud. Your story is mine. You gave me words I didn't know I needed." I screenshotted some, saved others. Most, I just read and let settle in my chest. Isolde didn't post again that day, or the day after. Her accounts went silent. No new articles, no statements, not even a deflection. Velma didn't call. Not to ask if I was okay, not to check on the house, not to scold me for airing the family's dirty laundry. She did, however, repost a Bible verse on her Facebook, something about forgiveness. That was it. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, watching the light dim across the hardwood floor, and let the silence do what it needed to do. That night, for the first time in years, I deleted the Twitter app from my phone. And I slept. No tossing, no 3 a.m., pacing, no checking if someone had posted about me. Just sleep, deep and clean. In the morning, I woke to a knock on the front door. I slid on my robe, padded downstairs, and opened it. Standing there, with a small duffel bag in one hand and a slightly crushed coffee cup in the other, was the man I hadn't seen in over a decade. My father. He looked older, not old in the way you expect a man pushing 70 to look, but in the way someone carries time when it's been filled with regret. His shoulders drooped slightly beneath a wrinkled flannel shirt, and the paper coffee cup in his hand had started to collapse near the lid. I hadn't seen Benedict Soren in over a decade, and here he was on my doorstep with a duffel bag and eyes that didn't know where to land. I opened the door wider. "Morning," he said, voice raspier than I remembered. "Didn't think I'd be standing here this long without turning around." I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked past me, slow, cautious, like a man entering a home that had once belonged to someone else. He looked around briefly, but didn't comment on anything. Just carried his bag to the edge of the kitchen and waited. I motioned to the table. "Sit." He did. We didn't make tea. We didn't pretend this was something it wasn't. He placed the bag on the floor, then reached into his coat and pulled out a paperback, dog-eared, worn, underlined. He set it on the table. "Thought I'd bring you something," he said, tapping the cover. "It's one of the first I ever put on the shelf at the store." Jane Eyre. Of course it was. We sat in silence for a while before he spoke again. "I should have spoken up years ago," he said. "When your mother let Isolde take your scholarship. I knew. I didn't agree. I just didn't stop it." I studied his face. "Why?" He exhaled slowly. "Because she was the easy one. Always smiling, always charming. And you asked hard questions. You didn't perform for us. I guess that scared me." His words weren't elegant. They weren't some polished apology rehearsed in the mirror. But they were honest. I nodded. I wasn't asking for favor. I just wanted fairness. He looked down. "I know." The stillness between us didn't feel strained anymore. It felt necessary. "I don't expect forgiveness. he added. But I needed to say it out loud. You deserved better than silence. I wanted to say something cutting, something sharp to match the years of absence, but I didn't. Not because I couldn't, but because I knew this moment wasn't about justice, it was about release. Later that evening, after he left for the bookstore he still ran part-time, therapy with a cash register, he called it, I walked upstairs and found Dorian in the study. He was on his laptop, headphones in, surrounded by manila folders and a highlighter that had bled through 3 pages. You know you don't have to keep collecting things, I said from the doorway. He turned to me, took the headphones off. I wasn't sure when to stop. I smiled, walked in, and sat beside him. You've been doing this since the first time she went after me, haven't you? He nodded. Before you knew what she was doing, I did. And I couldn't prove it, so I kept everything. I looked at the screen, screenshots, time-stamped social posts, legal letters. You needed to know you weren't alone, he said, even when you thought you were. I rested my head against his shoulder. For the first time, it didn't feel like I was leaning to stay upright. It felt like something stronger than that. The next day, I was at the office when a woman I didn't recognize stepped into the lobby. She was mid-40s, maybe older, with eyes that had seen enough disappointment to know what lies looked like. She carried a folder tight against her chest and asked for me by name. I invited her into the conference room. My name's Elena, she said. Last year, I lost my house. I'd invested everything I had into a startup your sister endorsed. Thought it was a sure thing. Thought I was helping the community. I waited. She set the folder on the table. It was your name on the paperwork. I thought you were involved. I opened the folder. Loan documents, email threads, copies of press releases, all rebranded, all misdirected. My name used without permission. I pushed a single sheet of paper toward her. The notarized legal statement that cleared my name and assigned responsibility to Isolde. I'm sorry you were misled, I said. You were right to be angry. But now you know the truth. She stared at the page for a long time. Her fingers trembled slightly. Thank you, she whispered. Then she stood and left without another word. That night, I visited my father's bookstore. It was just after sunset, the sky soft with pink and gray. A bell above the door jingled gently as I stepped inside. The scent of aged paper and quiet filled the space. He looked up from the counter and smiled. Back already? I didn't answer. Just wandered through the aisles until I found the classics shelf. There, tucked between 2 pristine copies of Austen and Wolfe, was the same worn copy of Jane Eyre he'd brought to my kitchen. I pulled it out. Inside, on the first page, he'd written in small, slanted script, "She who has suffered has strength. You are her." I pressed the book to my chest, closed my eyes, let it settle. A week later, I published a guest op-ed in a national magazine. It was about family, truth, and the cost of silence. I signed it with my full name, Blair Cade. They never said it before, so I said it myself. And now, they can never take it away. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight within our own families, where love and betrayal wear the same face. This story wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming your truth when no one else will. So let me ask you, have you ever been the silent one? The overlooked, the dismissed, the one who had to document every wrong just to be believed? If you have, I hope this story reminded you that your voice matters, especially when they try to silence it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story spoke to you, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that cut deep, heal slow, and remind us we're not alone.